Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the LeanTossup College Football Podcast Previews. Today, we are going to talk about what functionally amounts to breaking news for us. The Big Ten coaches poll actually came out today, so we're going to get some of a reaction to that, and we're also going to talk about We're going to preview some of the teams this year. So we're going to focus specifically on kind of the Big 12 and some of the teams from some other kind of lesser conferences. But that still will be important, and you'll see them a lot this year in various matchups and stuff like that. So I am joined as always by my co-host Buck Metrics. How are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you so much. Although we might have to arm wrestle right at the start here about calling Conference USA a lesser conference. I'll let it slide for this time. Just once, though.
I mean, it's fair. I mean, yeah, technically they do have Cincinnati. They have, I believe, yeah, they have UCF. They have, I think, functionally a lot of teams that are about to be the Big 12 next year. So, yeah, so I mean, yeah, they're not top tier, but a lot of the teams are moving on to greener pastures. So, yeah, it's not a bad conference. So
Okay.
that's fair. Anyways, all right, so moving on to the USA Today college coaches poll. So I'll just read it off now for viewers' references. Obviously, Buck and I have seen it. We'll talk about our comments on it first. So first, Alabama, they received 54 first place votes, by far and away the most of anybody else. Ohio State is two with five first place votes. Number three comes in at Georgia with six first place votes. Number four is Clemson, five Notre Dame, six Michigan, seven Texas A&M, eight Utah, nine Oklahoma, 10 Baylor, 11 Oklahoma State, 12 Oregon, 13 NC State, 14 Michigan State, 15 USC, 16 Pittsburgh, 17 Miami, Texas at 18 with one first place vote, which is weird to say the least. Wake Forest at 19, Wisconsin at 20, 21 Kentucky, 22 Cincinnati, 23 Arkansas, 24 Mississippi, which is, for clarification, I believe that's Ole Miss because Mississippi State would be Mississippi State. And then 25 is Houston. So, my first kind of takeaway from this list is that Pittsburgh is too high, and Texas is probably also a little too high. Clemson at 4 seems a little high. They haven't really proven anything. Like, for them to be 4, you need a massive upgrade for their quarterback. And Oklahoma State at 11 seems. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State seem both way too high. What are your thoughts on this? But the thing of it is, to be fair, like I've seen a lot of in my time of following college football for several years now, I've seen a lot of really bad coaches polls. Like I've seen ridiculous ones where it's like this is clearly wrong, but like this is like kind of okay. Now, to be fair, this isn't the AP. Crazy things happen in the AP pool, but I this isn't horrible. Like I kind of agree with a lot of the stuff on this list. It's not that objectionable to me. Do you kind of feel the same, or is this, or am I wrong here? This is just horrible.
I'd never call you wrong. I just say we have very different opinions here. The top three are pretty much impossible to argue about unless somebody just wants to just try to make shocking statements. After that, it's pretty easy to make a case that pretty much any team, literally four and below, can be put significantly lower. Um, we talked about Notre Dame, Clemson. I'm preparing a pretty strong indictment on them for our next pod. Um, Texas A&M, I'm just having a hard time, you know, that a school that's got Max Johnson looking at as a starting quarterback will be number seven, especially in an offense that is that confusing for a quarterback as well. Um, we're going over the Big 12, so I think you've got Big 12 teams here at 9, 10, 11 in Oklahoma, Baylor, and Oklahoma State, and we'll get into those. But I think the Big 12 is in for a lot of upheaval. I'll put it that way, and that's not reflected in the coaches poll. And realistically, USC, I love them. They're my school, but I'm having a really, really hard time thinking that 15. Maybe they'll be the 15th best team at the end of the season, but over the body of the season, I don't see them being the 15th best program.
Well, USC is a really interesting test case there, right? Because obviously they got an upgraded quarterback. Obviously they got an upgraded coach. Obviously they got an upgrade at wide receiver. They pulled Addison from Pittsburgh, and they got another wide receiver from Oklahoma. So obviously large upgrades in that team, better coaching staff. So obviously a lot of large upgrades. The question is, at times last year, Caleb Williams was kind of iffy. Like he was like, yes, he had great moments in some games. I believe he was in the Texas game, and that's why they won that game. And he had some great moments in some other games, but at the same time, if you have to keep performing to pull you to basically pull it out at the last second to win the game, the question is, why were you in that position in the first place, right? So I agree that they should be. They're a better. They're definitely a better team. No one's questioning that this team is worse than last year's team. But at a certain point, I think you have to kind of sit there and say, well, okay, but how good is this team? And I think that's kind of where the 15 is kind of sitting there, because like they're clearly a top team in the country. Whether or not that's a top 10 team, a top 20 team, a top 25 team, a top 30 team, like you can make an argument like if you said they were 30th, I could be like, yeah, okay. But I think that they probably are at about the 15th. And again, they are going to be playing lesser competition. They're going to be playing teams like Arizona, Arizona State. Now, to be fair, the Big 12 also not exactly the paradigm of competition when you have Kansas and Kansas State, but their schedule isn't that bad. They could pull off some wins. The bigger question is going to be like what happens when they play UCLA? What happens when they play I believe in the South, so that you have Utah. So they have some interesting questions, and what happens? Will they hit a speed bump against Arizona State or whatever, right? So I think it's hard to put the entire purpose of what I'm trying to say is it's extremely hard to place them somewhere, right? I
Yep.
think I think you can make an argument that I think you could be insane and say they should be top 10. That's very undefensible, but you could say that, and like there is some logic to it. But you could also make the argument that they should be 30th, and like that's kind of insane on the
Hmm.
same end on the other way, but it's not. I don't know. So like it's really weird to place them somewhere. I think kind of Texas is another weird one. I guess. Well, I mean, okay. Here's the question then. Okay, so which team was better last year, USC or Texas? Because theoretically, if you want to say that, because if you say USC was worse than Texas and USC is now ranked higher than Texas, then that would imply that USC got better over the offseason than Texas did. Now, Texas did improve a little bit. Obviously, they have a new quarterback in Quinn Ewers, but he hasn't, I don't think he's played it, or maybe he's played a couple of snaps in backup at Ohio State. Again, I mean, yes, he didn't beat out CJ Stroud, but CJ Stroud could be a top 5 draft pick next year. So it's weird. They've made some improvements on some pieces on their team, but like 18, like you want to see this team prove something before you start putting them in the top 20. Now, to be fair though, what a lot of these polls love doing is before teams play like a good team, they love trying to up their ranking a bit. So like this
Hmm.
screams like, oh, okay, let's give Alabama like a top 15 Texas, like a 15th ranked Texas to play. That's what that screams to me. But and it just like it's a sacrifice. Be like, here, take this 15th ranked Texas team and then crush them. Um, but this is the thing, right? Texas is way too high. I'd say Ole Miss is way too high too. Like Ole Miss was like not. I mean, basically they were carried by Matt Corral last year, and he's gone. So that seems way too high for me. Cincinnati again, they lost a lot of pieces after that championship run. I mean, I feel like if they didn't put Cincinnati there, they get some flack for not putting them there, but whatever. Houston actually could be a little higher. I think that team's actually not half bad. Michigan, I think, is also well. It's weird. I mean, the question is, if Michigan had lost to Ohio State in that game, where would Michigan be ranked right now?
Yeah.
And I think we all know the answer to that question. I think they'd be ranked similar to USC right now, because
Yep.
then if Ohio State had won that game, they clearly would have beaten that team called Iowa, and they would have then made it to the college football championship. And then sure, maybe they lose to Georgia. Who cares? But the point is that Michigan would be like 15th right now. And the thing of it is, in that game, right? How many times was it? Oh, huge run by Hassan Haskins. Huge run by
Hmm.
Hassan Haskins. Oh, big sack by Jordan Aiden Hutchinson. Right? Like, how many times were and those guys are gone now, right? And that's the thing, right? Like that's a really big. piece of that, and I don't think they can rely on those guys anymore because well they can't because obviously they're gone. But I don't think they can rely on someone stepping up to make that kind of production.
To your point, it might boil down to something as I love these little sliding door illustration moments. Michigan could probably owe their number 6 ranking to the fact that Ryan Day made a mistake when he promoted Kerry Coombs to defensive coordinator for the 2020 season. If he had just a kind of replacement level defensive coordinator, and Ohio State wins that game because they had a ridiculous offense, Michigan, to your point, is probably in that mid-teens area, and it's the same old story. You
Hmm.
know, that was not a peak Urban Meyer team that he beat. And I really like Ryan Day, but that was I want to say it was a fatally flawed, but the way they lost to Oregon and Michigan last year, um, just spoke to some real pockets of I don't want to say ineptitude, but vulnerability on the defense, which we hadn't really seen in Columbus for a while.
Well, the thing of it is that that vulnerability it came on the ground. Right, like
Hmm.
that's and because Oregon did the exact same thing. I think Anthony
Exactly.
Brown in that game had like I don't know 100 or so yards rushing. Like they ran the ball down their throats. And again, I remember that game, that the Michigan Ohio State game. How many times was like, oh, huge run by Hassan Haskins, huge like they didn't. Caden Mandamera didn't throw for like 300 yards, right? It was they were running the ball, and
Yep.
it's the same thing Oregon did. Oregon, I don't think they could actually throw the ball last year. Anthony Brown was really bad as a quarterback, but amazing at running the ball. And this is the thing: when you have two teams that are able to beat you the exact same way on the ground, then this is the thing. It's actually somewhat similar. The only team that actually had a good rushing game that Ohio State was able to beat last year was Michigan State, and the reason was because they just completely gutted their defense. They just
Hmm.
literally torched them. Like how many
Yeah.
times we see it's like, oh, another 45-yard touchdown pass. Like they just gutted them, and that was the thing. And the thing of it is, if Ohio State can fix rush defense, like that's literally all it is. Like if they can just stop them from running all over them, then this team is right there in the college football playoff, right? And
Yep.
and and again, like my model didn't think that Michigan was that good at running the ball. Still doesn't really. It thinks that Ohio State was still a better team, but the problem with that though is that they just were able to pull it off in that one game. And I mean, for the NFL we say any given Sunday. Here we say any given Saturday. But like this is the thing: if Hassan Haskins doesn't have that big of a game, and again he's now a running back for Tennessee, if he doesn't have that big of a game, then is Ohio State like they're in the semifinals? Maybe do they even beat Georgia, right? I mean, maybe not. I don't know that. So like this is the question, right? So no, I completely agree. Michigan's a little overvalued, but like at the same point in time, if they don't have that huge rushing game, then Ohio State wins that game by like 3 touchdowns, right? And that's the thing. So it's
Hmm.
it's interesting. Wisconsin at 20, surprisingly enough, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, I actually somewhat agree with that. I cannot, again, this is weird for me. This is a weird experience for me agreeing that Wisconsin is a decent team. But, like, I think they're, like, okay. And, like, you're 20th. That's okay. You could be an okay team at 20th. I think that's fine. I'll deal with them next year. Next year, I'll say they're horrible. But not this year, I'm like, yeah, they're okay. Utah, a bit of a disrespect there at 8. They should be, like, they
Yeah.
should be higher. But,
I do want to, yeah, I kind of want to revise my remark and say, outside the top 3, I can't make a case for making them lower.
mhm,
That seems on the very low end. I can make a stronger case to have them at 5 or 6 or maybe even 4, just because there's not a lot of gaps in what they return. Their quarterback isn't the best, but he's really solid, and
mhm.
they really return a lot around him too.
Exactly, right? And that's the thing. Utah's just a solid all around team. And I think that's an important thing. Interesting that there a lot of faith there in Bo Nix with Oregon at 12. That's a lot of faith. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
too much faith, I would say. Interesting Miami though. They do have Tyler Van
Van
Dyke, I
Dyke.
believe. Yeah. That's a little high. The thing of it is, I feel like if it wasn't this, like you actually move the other teams down. We think they'd be down. Miami would be like 15th. So like I think that's kind of the problem is that like they didn't know where to put them as well. Like there's a lot of teams in here that like they're probably a team, but we don't probably a decent team, but we don't know where to put them. But I think this is like mostly okay. There's some glaring obvious. There's some glaringly obvious ones. I'm actually honestly. Do you want to know the biggest surprise of who isn't on this list for me? I went through the list one time and I was looking for one team and I was shocked when they weren't on this list because I knew they were going to be bumped on this list by people who hype them. I look, where's Penn State on this list? How is Penn State not on this list?
Yeah. I think I think the voters probably got a little tired of you know, what USC kind of does every year in terms of just, hey, we're really good. We got a those talent here. And then by the end of the season, nope, they're not. And probably they're wise to Sean Clifford. I think I think if they had just quarterback X in there, they'd probably be ranked.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Because everybody always overhypes Penn State. Now, don't worry. I'm sure when Ohio State plays Penn State, they'll be ranked like 15th or something. So don't worry about that. But no, I'm really surprised. Like, I'm looking at this list. I'm like, where's Penn State? Where's Penn State? They always rank Penn State. Like, that's just a fact. Like, it doesn't even matter if Penn State is a good team or not. See, I always love one of the teams I always say they're too highly ranked is Penn State, but somehow they didn't rank them this time. So I can't say that. So good on you, college football coaches. So all right, let's move on to kind of our previews here. So the Big 12, we got a couple of quick hits ones that we're not going to spend the whole amount of time on just because it's not a lot there to talk about. But and we'll spend more time on this. We got four kind of quick hits, and then we'll have six kind of deeper dives. First of all, one of the bigger ones is Kansas. So this was a team this was Les Miles' team. That's right. I almost forgot about that. That was so Les Miles after he got fired from LSU, he went to Kansas. Then there was some scandal. I believe he covered up. Oh no, he covered up something at LSU, and then they fired him. And then and basically then he got replaced by the former coach for Buffalo, from the MAC, and he had a like again they were rebuilding from scratch basically. That Kansas had been basically destroyed under Les Miles, and they were rebuilding, and they got to 2 wins. Now, obviously, the first win came from an FCS team. Not a surprise an FBS team beats an FCS team, but obviously the other win came in probably the most hilarious fashion of the entire year, where Kansas, as like a 28-point underdog, upset Texas in Texas. Um, just an amazing game. That was an amazing game, and there was like so many points scored in that game. That game was amazing. Um, now
Well,
they're they're
let's just point out that somebody deemed that a nationally first place worthy Texas performance too.
Yes, that's right. That is a team that is ranked first place by one person. That was like, yeah, you know what? That team, they
Yeah.
showed some real grit there against Kansas. They came back. They came back. They were down 30
Yes.
points against Kansas. How can that not be the top ranked team in the country? No, I mean, it's hilarious. And but this so the over under the win total for this team is set at 1.5. This year now, so last year you got like over 1.5, and the juice was like plus 150. Now it's 1.5 even. They play an FCS team week 1. I think they play Duke again for some reason. I don't know. I think they're Duke and Kansas are trying to get free wins against each other. I think is how it goes. They played them last year too. Yeah, I don't hate Kansas over 1.5 here. I mean, I think there's only really one direction for this team to go. They were like, here's the thing. Yes, they only won 2 games last year, but they were in by no means only competitive in 2 games. They were actually quite competitive in a lot of games. They held Oklahoma late. They were competitive against Duke, but like there were so many times when they were like competitive against a team, and then they'd fall behind, and then they just get blown out. Be like, oh cool, we're tied or we're winning, and then all of a sudden they just lose by 21 points in just a spectacular fashion. So this was the thing. So I don't hate betting over on this team this year. What do you think about this team? Are you taking a step forward like I think?
Yeah, definitely taking a step forward. I've been a big fan of Leipold, the coach, basically since Buffalo hired him. I just remember the first time when I saw his name pop up in the Phil Steele, and his record at Wisconsin Whitewater was something ridiculous, like 101-3. It's just an unbelievable record. So I thought, okay, Buffalo's got a long build here, but this will be worth keeping an eye on. And he had him in the MAC title game twice. Unfortunately, he lost both times, and I actually had preseason bets on Buffalo to win both of those seasons, so that was tough. But I knew he'd take a step forward. I think it's just Kansas is in such a bad spot that he'll probably pull another upset. Maybe not I don't even know if it's on the same scale. Maybe not as visible as the win over Texas, which looking back wasn't that huge of an upset, just because Texas was pretty poor. But improvement under the radar, and I think next year is kind of where they'll be worth. I can talk about them all day, but don't know if a lot of people will listen to them about them all day. But next year I think they'll be a really interesting story.
Eventually they'll be so good they'll be added to the SEC. So then the SEC will get a good basketball program and a good football program. Watch, that'll happen one day. Lance Leopold will get them to the SEC. But again, that's yeah. I think this will be a good team to talk about in the future. This is going to be an underrated team. Like if you go through like this is going to be the team that's like, oh man, they're getting 21 points. I think they're only 14-point dogs. So like that's the kind of team this is going to be this year.
Yeah.
So that and that's fair. Again, I think this team will improve in the next couple of years. I think this team could eventually be a solid competitor. I think they need some more time to build up, but like next year, like this team could go to a bowl, and then maybe the year after they could compete for what's left of the Big 12.
And
Um,
that's the thing, yeah. In the post Oklahoma and Texas Big 12, I definitely think they can get to a bowl. Yeah. By the way, I just got it right here. 109 wins and 6 losses at
wow,
Wisconsin Whitewater.
that's that's crazy. That's a lot. That's a long time too. He's what there for like what 10?
Yeah.
That'd be like what almost like 8 seasons. That's a long
Uh
time.
yeah, '07 to 14, so that's 8 seasons.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's such a long time. But yeah, I mean, again, crazy that it took so long to move up. But yeah, now that he's they're making some strides. Again, Kansas is not an easy place to win at, obviously. For football, not for basketball. They obviously did win the national championship in basketball, but yeah, for football, it's a rebuilding project. Next up, West Virginia. So obviously, so West Virginia's got a huge pickup this year for JT Daniels. They grabbed him from Georgia because they decided to stick with Stetson Bennett for some reason. And then JT Daniels was like, I'm out of here. And then he apparently somehow decided on West Virginia. Um, I mean, West Virginia was always a team last year when it was like they won games they shouldn't have won, and then they lost games they shouldn't have lost, which is again a very, very Big 12 thing to do. Um, I don't hate them. Like I think they play Pittsburgh week 1. Yeah, what like 7-point dogs. Watch out for them against that team. Like they could do some damage against some of these teams that aren't suspecting. And like JT Daniels wasn't bad. He was weirdly they wanted Stetson Bennett, I think, because Stetson Bennett was a much more even quarterback. I think JT Daniels has a higher ceiling, but they wanted the more even quarterback just to because again, if your entire and we talked about Georgia last week, if your entire purpose is just to slow the other team down and make them hate playing football, then you don't need an amazing quarterback. You don't need Patrick Mahomes. You just need someone to pass the ball and get that first down, right? So what are your thoughts on this? I'm a little high on West Virginia. I don't think this isn't like the sky is the limit, but this is definitely can get a good upset or two. What do you think?
Yeah, for since Neil Brown's been there, it seems like their problem has been they didn't have any kind of offense to go with a really good defense. I think they lose some, decent amount on defense. The offense, I think, they get Graham Harrell from USC, who USC people for the most part are not really enamored with him, but he definitely improved that offense. They just didn't play as physical as USC fans wanted. Not that West Virginia really screams finesse, but Neil Brown is it's kind of surprising if you watched West Virginia play. Neil Brown's one of those air raid guys, and now he's actually got a couple more pieces there. I just have no idea what the receivers are. They could be great. Just when that Daggy kid was the quarterback throwing it all over the stadium to everybody but his own guys. We really don't know how good the receivers are and can be. I would point out that Harrell really turned around the USC offense right away. In his first season, he actually took a true freshman in Keaton Slovis to, I think he got Pac-12 Offensive Rookie of the Year, which is not easy to do.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of high on West Virginia this year. Um. So TCU is again another interesting year. Um. They have they got rid of their longtime head coach Gary Patterson. He kind of built that program. He's now randomly doing stuff with Texas. That's kind of odd, but not that odd. Um, but yeah, so TCU is an interesting kind of team. Again, this was a team that wasn't really a Big 12 team. They kind of got added in the second last round of conference expansion. They've had a couple of good years, but then also a couple of like really kind of down years. I don't really have a good read on this team. I think there could make some improvements. I think some of the stuff with Gary Patterson got a little bit old and stale, which is kind of a little concerning that he's now doing stuff with Texas. If you're talking about Texas in a minute, that's not the greatest for them. But like, what do you think about this team? This team always for me had like solid fundamentals, but just was never able to really pull it off. And I think that it was the right decision to move on from Gary Patterson to kind of move to something new. But at the same time, I can't really shake. Like I think they could kind of do some better things this year, but I can't really shake the feeling that they're still going to kind of underperform a little bit. But watch them to pull off some upsets, though. What do you think about them?
Yeah, what's really weird about them is, Patterson was pretty much considered a defensive genius, and they actually had the worst defense in the entire Big 12, which is, surprising. And then they had, if you kind of followed any TCU fans on Twitter, you would see that everybody was complaining about this whole mess of different people calling plays. And then I was surprised to look in my preseason analysis that last year they had the second best offense by my metrics in the whole Big 12. Kind of despite their best intentions. Um, I was kind of curious because you've told me that you are struggling with these quarterbacks with small sample sizes and how your model kind of extrapolates them to be Superman. So I've got their returning quarterback. He started, I think, 3 games or so. Um, I have him with a QB plus of 188, which means that basically he's the best non-option quarterback that we've ever seen. Um, so I'm wondering if your model has TCU in the playoffs, and if so, how far they're going.
Yeah, I have them as. I mean, surprisingly not. I think my model hates their defense, but it definitely likes their offense. They're scoring a ton of points here.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's an interesting case. Um, yeah, they're favorites against. They're basically even with Oklahoma, so that's pretty cool. Um, yeah, it's weird that they're. No, that's weird. Anyways, but yeah, I think they're a decent team. I don't know if they're gonna be able to because they do have some tougher games at times, right? Like they're gonna have to obviously play Baylor and so I don't know. I'm a little iffy on them. I don't know how good they are, but yeah, my model actually does kind of like them, which is again is that kind of weird glitch with quarterbacks with such a small sample size. You can't really forecast how well they're going to do through the year and so um that's an interesting problem for me to model going forward. But yeah, TCU, I think they could be kind of average team. They can maybe get to a like I could definitely see them getting to a bowl. But like I don't think they're really going to be challenging for the Big 12
No,
championship. Um all right, Iowa State. So this is an interesting team. Um they lose their quarterback Brock Purdy. He was actually the official title is Mr. Irrelevant. The last person drafted in the NFL draft, he is Mr. Irrelevant. He is playing for not Stanford, San Francisco. Same state, but different league. No, he plays for the 49ers now. He's drafted by the 49ers last. Kind of think he might like we might see him a little bit in the preseason because they don't really have a ton of other quarterbacks that they're going to want to play. So we Brock Purdy might get his preseason debut against Green Bay here this weekend. Um, I don't like this team now going forward. They lost Brock Purdy. They lost Brees Hall. He was a second round running back for the Jets now. I think this team is going to take a massive step back. And I think there was reasons why Matt Campbell wanted out. And I think like for that reason, like I think he knew they were gonna take a giant step back and he kinda wanted out. And I think he may have lost his window because if you're sitting here now and you're sitting here and you're gonna be the Iowa State team you're gonna be the head coach of Iowa State and you say you win 4 games, which is kind of what I have them at, then what job are you gonna get? Right? Like that's the thing. What kind of job are you gonna get after this, right? So um they're playing. They've got a pretty rough schedule this year. Obviously the general one, but I've got them as pretty big dogs against every single Big 12 team. So yeah, it's not great for them. Does not sound particularly great for them this year. Um, what do you think about Iowa State? Are you with me on the Giants step back? Like that was their year, and to be fair, that was kind of their year, right? Like this was their returning seniors, all this stuff, right? Do you think that was their year, or do you think they might be able to run it back and be a little bit?
yeah, I guess I believe in Matt Campbell more than you. I think that ended that window, and I think the next window is at least 1 season away. I had them pretty clearly the best team in the Big 12 last year. They just had some bad luck. I had them at 1.5 games worth of bad luck last season, which I think kind of between that and how good Campbell is at developing, I think that I don't see him taking as large of a step back as you, um, because they were better to begin with, and they've got a really good coach. Um, I don't know. It's not really compelling. As much as I like Man Campbell, I don't see myself making plans to watch Iowa State a lot in 2022.
That's fair. I don't think many people will have a desire to do that. Um, but again, it's gonna be it's we'll have to see. Maybe they could surprise us a little bit, but yeah, not I'm not holding up much hope for Iowa State this year. All right, moving on to the kind of deeper dives we have. So one of the top teams we want to talk about here is Texas Tech. They kind of started last year very slow, but then they were actually able to do quite a lot towards the end of last year, cap it off with a bowl win. I believe they beat Mississippi State, if I'm not mistaken. I think like 10-point dogs. They outright won that game. Um, I kind of like this team. This team is kind of fun. It's been a long time since we've seen a competitive Texas Tech team. Um, like this team could this team could do pretty well. I mean, obviously they have the rivalries with like stuff like Texas and stuff, but yeah, they are definitely not. Most people don't consider Texas Tech a top team in the Big 12. But like they could be, right? Like if Oklahoma takes a step back, which we suspect, and the question is basically Baylor. Like if Baylor were to take a step back, this Texas Tech team could be one of the better teams in the Big 12 here. Um, and obviously if Texas blows it like they've been known to do, then yeah, I think this Texas Tech team could go pretty far. What do you think about this Texas Tech team?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, they won 7 games last year, and just usually, I think if you asked anybody how many games they won last year, I don't think most fans would get that right. I thought they won 6, and I think I know a lot. Firing a coach, and granted they fired him mid-season, but firing a coach that's on track to win 7 games is kind of a SEC move. That's not really something you'd expect at a Texas Tech, but God bless them for doing it. I really like what they've done since. Texas Tech just seems like one of those programs that's not going to be successful by doing the same thing as everywhere else, just better with better talent, because that's not how it's going to work in Lubbock. So they went outside the box. They hired this McGuire guy, who's kind of a high school legend in Texas, which is good. I think that that's going to help recruiting a lot. I think a lot of talent's going to be steered towards his way. And then I really like what he did. He hired the offensive coordinator from Western Kentucky, Zach Kitley, who has Texas ties. Before he was at Western Kentucky, he was at Houston Baptist. Um, so I think, with those 2 points, you're going to have really strong recruiting. And then he did my favorite thing as a first-time head coach in FBS, and his defensive coordinator is Tim DeRuyter, who was a head coach at Fresno State and actually did a pretty good job there right out of the gate. So you've got this experience of somebody who's been there before as a head coach. Um, Not only that, DeRuyter was also the defensive coordinator at Texas A&M, so he also has Texas ties. So I really like that group of people, and especially McGuire not being too proud to say, no, I know what to do. I'm inferring a lot of deference by these hires. I could see that offensive and defensive coordinator combination actually being in a program more prominent than Texas Tech. So it works all the way around. I like that. We go back to Kitley, who led that amazing season for Bailey Zapp in the Hilltopper offense last year. If Tyler Shuck is going to be the starter, I actually have him as a top returning quarterback in the Big 12. He had a QB plus of 143. I'm not counting our friend at TCU because he had 50 throws. And this is already the number 3 offense in the Big 12 last year. So I think that it might be a little plug and play. The one thing that you're not going to see is Kitley had immediate success last year because he brought his quarterback and a couple of receivers from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky, and there's no such thing going on here in Lubbock, but he's proven, and I think the potential is there. They definitely look overlooked. I don't know if they can get past 7 or 8 wins, but in the last pod, you seem to be salivating over when can I take a shot at Nebraska, because Nebraska is very much a soft target, and I think this is a team that is poised to strike a soft target. They just need the right spot. And hint, hint, soft target I've got my eye on. Just got a first place vote in the coaches poll. Week 4 versus Texas, they host Texas. Don't know if they'll win, but I think that'll be a game where Texas gets a lot more than they're expecting.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Tyler Show obviously was a quarterback for Oregon. For some reason, he didn't get the start this year. They gave it to Anthony Brown instead. Questionable kind of decision there, I think. But yeah, we'll have to see. I'm This team could do something. He was not a bad quarterback for Oregon at all. So we're gonna have to see how well this Texas team Texas Tech does. But the thing of it is, again, in a lot of cases, the defenses the Texas Tech is going up against are nowhere near as good as the defenses Oregon was going up against, right? So they will have opportunities to pick apart some defenses and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm a little high on Texas Tech. We'll have to see. They could be a really interesting team, or I mean, maybe if Tyler Show doesn't show up, then they could struggle a bit. But yeah, we'll have to see. Now, this is an interesting one. Oklahoma State. So this is one of the best defenses last year in the country, as evidenced by the fact that I think pretty much all their games went under the total. Like they were there a lot of the times. They played in many low scoring games. Now the thing is, again, that's two ways, right? Because again, you're playing in the Big 12. The opponent defenses are pretty bad too, right? So the fact that you couldn't put up the points, not the greatest sign. They're trying to win through defense, which is an interesting tactic in the Big 12. Um, so they lost some talent, obviously. Their QB was not great. Despite all this, however, they did go to the Big 12 championship game because they beat Oklahoma in the last week of the season. They did lose to Baylor. I believe Baylor had 4 goal line stands, if I remember correctly. But again, this offense is just like I can't trust this offense enough. Um, I think if you're looking at this team, I really don't see how you can. I don't see how you can basically see this team taking a step forward. I think that was kind of a peak season for them. Um, I actually can't believe Spencer Sanders, their quarterback, is actually still in college football. I thought he would have graduated by now, but I guess they're gonna run back for one more season. Are you kind of with me on this team, or do you think this defense and the defensive powerhouse in the Big 12 can get the job done?
Yeah, well, their defense, my metrics doesn't like what they return just because they lost so many starters. Now, apparently, they rotated a lot of more guys in. So if you are a believer in their defense, you might have a good argument or case to still believe in them. I really like Derek Mason, who they picked up. I think though there's going to be always a transition when you lose a guy who's as good as Knowles, who's now at Ohio State. So I think the defense is probably going to be okay. Derek Mason's just too good. It's not going to be as good as it was before. I had him number 3 nationally, which kind of in a vacuum seems a little high, but if you watched them, they were just legit all season. I mean, they were just a tough defense. To your point about the offense, Spencer Sanders, he had a QB plus of 86, which is, really not good for a guy at his stage of his college career. The thing that really concerns me is one thing I always keep an eye on for any program is, the coach's side of the ball. How are they doing? And Sanders has really stunk for 2 years. And I really wonder about where a program is headed when the coach's side of the ball is just not really making progress. It's kind of what Gary Patterson was going through at Texas Christian. I don't know if this is that severe or imminent because they were still overall a really good team, but just kind of makes me wonder about the sustainability of the program's success. Um, they lost their last offensive coordinator after the 2019 season to with Sean Gleason. They lost him to Rutgers. And they did this, they replaced him. I hate this move if you're a big time program. They promoted a long time wide receiver coach. And I just don't like that. And the offense has just not been the same since then. And it's kind of surprising because Mike Gundy really has tended to make a series of really, really good coordinator hires. And it's just weird to take a long time position coach and just think that suddenly it's this guy's time. So I don't really like where they're headed. The thing is, I also show them having almost 2 games worth of good luck last season, which is pretty strong and pretty inclined to to regress. And there's a there's a Twitter account. It's at K Ford Ratings. Kelly Ford runs it. He is a really good follow. Not only because he agrees with me a lot, but also because he doesn't always agree with me. So when I'm citing these good luck, bad luck metrics, I'm also going to basically just cite. He's got projections, just saying kind of in a vacuum. Where is he expecting one loss, big one loss for teams this year in 2022 versus 2021? So I had 2 games of good luck for Oklahoma State, and he's projecting Oklahoma State to lose 2.8 wins versus last season. So you've got 2 different data points saying big step back for the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of fair. It's such a weird team. I think in a lot of ways they kind of did luck their way into the Big 12 championship, and yeah, I think it's a weird kind of way to when everybody in the Big 12 is focused on offense. It's kind of weird to try to win through defense. So yeah, I'm expecting them to take a little bit of a step back. I mean, at a certain point, you can only if your defense is having to compensate for your offense, eventually there's not people are going to figure out your defense, and then they're just gonna blow you out, right? So that's the thing. You need to be able to score points in football and specifically in the Big 12. Because it's not sustainable to keep replacing big pieces on the defense. And again, also there is that good luck, right? Like they did have some pretty good luck. I think they could definitely take some losses from kind of mean reversion on that. So we'll have to see. All right, so kind of the big one I think everybody wants to talk about, or wants us specifically to talk about, Texas. So this is the thing. So this is a really interesting one for me. So obviously they fired Tom Herman 2 years, well, bit over a year ago. Actually, closer to a year and a half ago now. They were supposed to become this really top tier school after that. And they've now, with the new NIL era, they've actually done that. They've been able to pick up they've been able to get some talent through the transfer portal. Specifically, they've signed Archie Manning. So they've been able to recruit better than they were before. But as of yet, and again, haven't hasn't happened yet, but as of yet, we have not seen results pay off. I remember last year we were told that the 2 quarterbacks were actually pretty good. I remember early on in the season we were told that Casey Thompson and or Hudson Card. I can't remember which one was. I changed my mind sometimes, but I remember saying one of them was actually very promising, and then they both kind of sucked. Their defense was horrible. I like so many times like their offense was good at scoring points. They were great at scoring points. That was not the problem. The problem was stopping the other team from scoring points too. And and this is the thing. I have a lot of questions about whether or not they can reproduce what they were able to do like they fell apart last year. Like literally after they lost to Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, they literally just fell up and they had a massive lead in that game and then they blew it and then the team just kind of fell apart after that. I think they won like what, one or two more games after that. And they won the last game against a Kansas State team that was really hurt too. So no, I the thing of it is the analysis will say, okay, they're adding Quinn Ewers, a better quarterback, but people said they've had good quarterbacks in the past. They're rebuilding some of the team, okay, but like they've been doing that for a while now. Like this is Texas. It's not like they were recruiting like a bunch of 3-star athletes. Like these guys were good guys, and the fact is, if you weren't able to develop them before, or if you had this potential and you weren't able to develop it before, then I have real questions about this, and I also have questions about why Archie, like when they see the fact that that Texas has only been able to underdevelop these athletes. I have questions about why Archie Manning decided to go to Texas, but I suspect there was some bags of cash somewhere. But that's beside the point. The point is that I like this team is going to do something weird. Like they're going to like they play Alabama week 2. Watch them like beat Alabama and then lose every other game for the rest of the season. Like that, some crazy thing will happen with them, and I think Sark probably gets like what do you put the odds of Sark getting fired at the end of this year are? Like by next year, what are the odds that Sark's the head coach of Texas?
I'd say 90%.
90. Now you're very high on. So what? You said Archie Manning. You think Archie Manning saved his job,
No, I just think they don't have the appetite for another rebuild so quickly. I think that they're going to give him at least 3 years.
even if they don't make a bowl?
Yeah, it could get really interesting, and um, who knows? They have like 17 different people there who think they're athletic director, so maybe 4 of them fire him, but the other 13 don't, and we see if he's still there.
What do you think about this team? Because the thing is, like statistically, you could say, okay, they have a better quarterback. They're upgrading a lot of parts of the team. They should be better. That's what the smart money would say, I guess. But then also smart money is saying, yeah, no, no, no. But they're Texas; they're gonna fall apart. Where do you fall on this? Do you fall on the like never trust Sark, or do you think he can maybe pull off something here?
Yeah, I'm pretty much driving the never trust Sark bus. Um, I guess to get to your point real quick about why Arch Manning committed to him, I think that there's a really, really strong case of Sark developing quarterbacks. He did a great job as offensive coordinator at USC in developing quarterbacks. At Washington, he did a really, really good job with Keith Price. When he came back as head coach to USC, people kind of forget just how awful when Kiffin got fired in 2013, the quarterback position was. And in 2014, he took Cody Kessler just 4 steps forward right away. Um, and then obviously his work at Alabama too. I think that he's got a good case on quarterbacks. So I think that really solves the Arch Manning question. Here's the thing about Texas. I've seen a lot of the justification for last season as well. He just needs to install a winning culture, and he needs his guys. The problem is they went by my metrics, they went from second to fourth in offense in the Big 12. In defense, they went from fifth to seventh. Um, this isn't like they just need to learn how to win close games. They took a big step back. That was a talented team. I think they were like the second best team by my metrics in the year before. They just they had a tendency to really just lose games they shouldn't have under Herman. But this is just, this was worse than Herman. It was kind of funny at the time about you're going to fire Tom Herman and replace him with Steve Sarkisian because what do you're not even making the kind of what eternal sin of we're getting out of the next guy what we lacked in the last guy. You're getting the same thing. You're getting a recruiter who really can't win games. God bless Tom Herman for winning that Cotton Bowl that one year. He didn't win his conference. Um, so I think they're in a bad spot. Their staff, it's just amazing with the good staff that they have, but Sark's just not a good head coach. I'm glad he's sober. I hope he stays sober. But he's just not a good head coach, especially for a place like Texas. Lane Kiffin found himself when he had to figure things out on the sidelines in Boca Raton. And I think that's what Sark needs to do. He needs to kind of just like go to MAC training camp and try to fix Ohio or something. I think that he might find whatever's within him. Their quarterback play stunk last year. They get the lesser of those 2 quarterbacks returning in Hudson Card. They get Quinn Ewers, who, great. He's taken 2 snaps. He hasn't thrown a pass. If that's the guy that's going to save your program, that's tough. I can't be on board with that. The Vegas has the total for their wins at 8.5, which seems really high to me, but if they're number 16 or whatever they were, maybe that's not that high. I have them, somewhere between 7 and maybe up to 8, but getting over 8, I just don't see happening at all this year.
Yeah, I do agree with that. It's hard, right? I kind of think that especially Texas, they're gonna want they're gonna want to win, and I suspect and this is the thing. I I saw this when they did hire Herman the first time, not Herman, when they hired Sarkeesian, because basically they said, okay, Tom Herman couldn't get the job done, so we need someone else who will be able to do it. And their solution to that was apparently, okay, well, Alabama was really good at offense last year. Let's just hire the guy who did that offense. And they completely forget the fact that Nick Saban basically just takes people and rehabilitates them. And it's like he does this. How many times has he done this? And then they go to Alabama. It's like, oh my God, they're so good. And he had Najee Harris, the guy who's now been amazing. I think Najee. No, did Najee Harris win the Heisman or not? I can't remember. Is either Najee Harris or the
Derrick
other.
Henry won the Heisman a couple of years before that.
No, no, no. In 2020, who won the Heisman? Was it Najee Harris who won the
It
Heisman, or
was
was
the
it?
it was the receiver, wasn't it?
Yes. Oh my God, what's his name? Devonte Smith.
Yeah,
Yeah, Devonte Smith won the Heisman. So, but it's, okay, again, that's so they had Devonte Smith, they
yeah.
had Najee Harris, they had Mac Jones, right? That's three first round draft picks alone just on scoring points. And it's like, oh man, this guy's so good. It's like, well, he had three first round draft picks on
Yeah,
his
your
offense.
backup quarterback was an imminent Heisman winner.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, right? So this is the thing, and then they had, I think they also had another. I think they had an offensive lineman get drafted first, but that was because the Raiders are dumb and do weird draft decisions. But no, the thing of it is, like, I just, if that's the guy, and the thing is, again, like, those players were really good. I mean, Mac Jones was somewhat a finalist for Rookie of the Year last year. Najee Harris functionally saved that Steelers team, literally carried them on their back, literally carried them on his back to the playoffs last year. And Devonta Smith was actually pretty good with the Eagles. They also actually, yeah, all three players were so good that the teams they were on made the playoffs last year. And we're like, no, 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 that was Sark. Sark did that. Like, come on. And this is the problem, right? How many times do we see struggling college football blue buds saying, "Oh, okay, let's get random hot insert name of hotshot coordinator who had a really good year one year. Let's get them, and then that'll fix everything." And then they suck because they were part of they were behind a really good head coach like Saban or whatever. We see this so many times, and I I actually think Sarkeesian could get fired. Honestly, I think that Texas
Wow.
is not going to want to get, because the thing is they're headed they're headed to the SEC, right? Like, so this year is their second last year in the Big 12, right?
Hmm.
Next year would be their last year in the Big 12. But next year is going to be the weird expanded Big 12. If you're Texas, and say at the end of this year you say, okay, fine, Sarkeesian's not the guy. Say you win 5 games this year, and you're like, okay, this guy sucks. He took Queen Ewers, he almost broke him. Next year we get Archie Mannion here. Like, do you let him have another year? Because how much more damage could he do to your program in one more year? And then, do you want to install the next guy? Like, okay, we're going to the SEC year one, and then, okay, bam, here's a brand new guy to take us into the SEC.
Yeah, you make a good point. If under hypothetical, if I'm Texas and I hired Sark, what do? I hand in my resignation and say, you know what? I was stupid and I didn't realize that this guy's only finished better than third in his division once in his entire career. My bad. Let's negotiate a severance and I'll go ruin some other program.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing. But like, if you're that's what you should do if you were the one who hired Sark. But
Yeah.
assuming that's not you, then I don't know. I don't.
You
Yeah.
make a very strong case for it. I think that you know, there's just kind of a limit. We might call it the Arkansas theory about how many coaches you can have just paying out huge buyouts at the same time. You know, they're paying Herman. Do they want Sark also on the payroll as a second and third head coach to bring in a new guy? You know, I guess, and this comes to an interesting discussion too. You're probably not going to have, I don't know, maybe Texas is one of those programs that can money whip people, as they say. Maybe they'll still have the dollars to do that. I just kind of wonder about what caliber of coach you're going to get if you fire somebody after 2 years, and especially with the reputation for such chaos that that program has. As painful as it was, I think USC only gets Lincoln Riley because they let Clay Helton, you know, completely crap the bed and leave no doubt that they gave him every chance to fix it. And I think 2 seasons really limits the pool for the next guy.
Well, I think the next question after that would be, who are they going to get? Who could they get, right? Like, I mean, to be fair, we said the same thing. We obviously weren't doing the podcast then, but I would have said the exact same thing about USC, right? Who's USC going to get? I wouldn't have said Lincoln Riley, right? So, I mean, what are the targets, right? So, like, obviously not Brian Kelly. Um, like, not like you're not going to get Mario Cristobal. You're not going to get Kirby Smart. Obviously not Nick Saban. Maybe if you are really sneaky, maybe you can get Dabo. Maybe that's a kind of
No,
that's
no
crazy though.
way. You got to go way down the totem pole to get to realistic targets here.
But that's the thing, right? Like, okay,
I'm thinking you're looking like at a
Matt
if you
Campbell.
that's the next way I was going to say if you can convince Matt Campbell, hey, it's not as crazy here. We're just as clean and easygoing as Iowa State, and hope that you can snow him. But you're at that level, and I love Matt Campbell too. But
Hmm.
you're looking at that kind of a resume. I mean, yeah. I honestly, at that point, the best hires they can make would be the kind of people that their fan base would not go for.
Well,
Um,
that's the thing. But the thing of it is, you're going to the SEC, right? So assume you fire Sark at the end of this year, which again,
yeah,
that's not even fair. It might actually be the end of next year. You're about to go to the SEC. There aren't a ton of coaches walking around there that have sustained success coaching the SEC because they're currently working in the SEC.
yeah,
That's the whole point of the SEC is that if you can survive here, you stay here. So this is the question, right? Like, there's not many of them wandering around. Like, maybe you try to get Gus Malzahn from
no, stop.
UCF, but
Come
that's
on,
insane.
what's he gonna
Exactly, right? That's the
fix?
thing, right?
No,
Like,
I'll
there's
give you the one. I'll give you the one name that they could get that the smart people would go nuts for, and they might be able to kind of just sway public opinion. And he's in the SEC footprint, and that's Jamie Chadwell at Coastal.
oh, okay.
I would love to see him, and I don't even really root for Texas, but it would be cool to see what he could do at Texas with that talent, with how much talent is in that state. Now, could they coordinate their 17 athletic directors to make it happen? Don't know, but that's you would have to go that deep, and I would just wonder if they could sell that. But that's you'd have to go to a G5 guy that's really got that kind of you know upside and proven record.
Well, that's the thing. You'd have to go to like a G5 guy, and that's the thing. Oh, maybe you could get whoever's coaching Cincinnati, with Luke Finkel, maybe.
He's not going to leave for tech for that. He's like,
Well, the thing is, again, I'm just trying to figure out like what names. Like, I'm throwing out names, kind of,
yeah,
but like,
yeah, and more personality. It's not him.
mhm.
He's very Midwest. He's very Ohio, and he doesn't want to leave the Midwest.
But anyway, so we've probably spent too long talking about Texas. I'm sure we'll talk about Texas more in the future. But
I,
no, I mean it's such a fascinating case study of what you should or shouldn't do here. And
yeah,
the more we talk about it, the more we realize that they're real. Like, if they don't have a good year this year, they are really kind of screwed
yeah.
here.
That
And
that might be a segment that we do every week. Is like, who's going to be the Texas coach next year?
yeah, we'll have to see. I don't know. I'm lower on it. I'm not sure if my books will give me a prop on it, but like, is Sarkisian the head coach of Texas next year? I'd 1,000% bet no on that. But anyways, all right. Next up, a team that actually can win the Big 12 next year, Baylor. So obviously they had a really good year last year, and again, this always seems to happen with Baylor. They're good, and then their head coach has some sort of scandal, and they leave, and then they become really good again. So this is just like a quietly good like a quietly strong performing program here in the Big 12 and also Texas because they're from Texas. But yeah, they have a decent quarterback, a good offensive line, good defense. Like, how many actually they were in the Big 12 title game, what, the last 2 years in a row, I think. Yeah, because they were there's a couple times they played Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game a couple of years. So like, oh, you're on mute, I think. Yeah, they've been in the Big 12 title game a
Yeah,
couple times.
2 out of 3. Yeah,
Yeah, two of the last. That's a pretty good record, right? And yet
yeah,
they're still like plus 500 to win the conference. Like, that's something. Like, this Baylor team is a team you can get excited about. They're constantly underestimated by betting markets. That's a very consistent thing. Um, I don't know. For me, bet against this team at your own peril, and I kind of like them to win the Big 12. To win the Big 12. What do you think? Do you think do you think what their current success is sustainable, or do you think they're gonna take a step back?
yeah. They get it. I really like the coach. He seems like a good human being too. He just kind of gets life. Um, he made a big boy decision. His OC, his first offensive coordinator, stunk, and he fired him after 1 year, and he got a huge upgrade by bringing in Jeff Grimes from BYU, and that really paid off. They also have a very experienced offensive line. They made an interesting move at quarterback. They ran off Gary Bohannon. They did it in like just a really good way. Just say, "Hey, spring's over. You're not going to be the starter here. We're going to tell you now." Maybe exposes us at quarterback, but if you want to start, you should look elsewhere. And I think God bless him for that. It's interesting because the guy that they replaced him with, I had rated a little lower. Now he had less experience. We'll see. It's interesting. Their defense actually, is just below a significant amount of returning talent improvement metric. So they don't take a step back. They might improve a decent amount. What's interesting at this team, I had them fourth overall in the Big 12. I had them seventh in offense and third in defense, which kind of just sounds like you just don't beat yourself and you're good at everything, but not great at anything. And you just kind of let the other teams beat themselves. And when you have, Steve Sarkisian in your conference, that's easier to do. The reason I'm not gonna pick them to win is they had good luck of almost 3 games last season, which is nuts. And K Ford has them dropping 2.4 wins from last season. So you've got a couple data points saying there was a lot of luck in last season, which lines up with them being fourth overall. I think they'll have a good season, but I think their good season is like 8 or 9 wins.
That's fair. But at the same point in time, when you don't have Lincoln Riley in the Big 12, that might be enough for first place, right?
Yep.
That's the thing. So, I don't know. Possible regression candidate, but this is, again, a team that you're going to find value in. They're probably going to be underdogs against Texas or Oklahoma or whatever. You'll be able to get value on them there. Yeah, not a bad team to keep an eye on through the year, but yeah, they could be looking at a little bit of a step back though. Next up, Oklahoma. So again, this is the team that are reeling from the loss of Lincoln Riley, and then the fan base online is definitely very upset about that.
Oh, are they? I didn't notice.
No, I mean it's a weird relationship they have with USC now, and I mean whatever. I mean yes, it's not. I don't know. Oklahoma is a decent. It's not like a. It's not a power team. Like it's not a blue blood. Like they're up there. It's not like this was. It's not like Oklahoma is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it actually is. But like it's actually a good team in the middle of nowhere, though. Um, but no. So now they've got Brent Venables. He's from Clemson, right? Yeah. Um, the thing of it is, though, Oklahoma has performed. Like Oklahoma, I usually peg them as a team that underperforms. They usually do. This team screams to me they're going to take a giant step back because again, it's different when you're in the ACC. Those like you're playing teams like Boston College, which I'm sorry has not been particularly good the last couple of years. Same thing, you're playing Duke. There's a couple teams in there that usually are not good year to year that don't have particularly good offenses. There are a couple teams that have good offenses, but most of them are kind of really bad. Now you're looking at the Big 12. They call it Madden football for a reason. Um, it's a bit of an adjustment. Now you do have Dylan Gabriel, who was the former quarterback for UCF, which I like. He was a great quarterback there for UCF. Is one of the reasons why I liked UCF. But it's a tough like does I mean again obviously the Big 12 is not known for defenses, but are they going to be able to are like again he is coming back from a season-ending injury, should be okay, but again, there's a lot here that we don't know about this team. Like this team could be really good, but it's probably not going to be really good. And it could be an improving project. I suspect you're going to see this team might take a bigger step back this year. They might get better next year, and then they're going to the SEC, and then maybe they could be like a I don't know. I don't even know. We haven't even heard anything about how they're going to do divisions yet. So
Yeah.
they could be a middle tier team in the SEC, maybe an upper tier team, depending on if they get a good quarterback or not in a couple of years. But yeah, but again, they did lose a lot. Like right, they lost their head coach, they lost their star quarterback, or what was their actually they lost both their star quarterbacks. They lost a lot, and I don't know if they're going to be able to recover that this year. Um, how do you have them pegged? Do you have them pegged more as an offensive team this year, or more as more of a defensive team this year?
Yeah, definitely defensive. I think long term, you're right about kind of a middle tier SEC team. I think they just fit the program that's going to be fighting life and death for a 16 team playoff. Since they just seem like they would sneak into that format. Um, I think their defense absolutely will improve. Venables is just probably the best defensive coordinator. Um, I'm guessing I'd say since Pete Carroll left for the NFL. The guy's just awesome. What I like about what he did too is he's a first time head coach, and people laugh that he brought in Ted Roof, was not a good head coach, but he has that experience, and he's got him kind of there as a patsy there, where if anything goes wrong with the defense, he can just throw Ted Roof off the window or off the rooftop, and not to make a bad pun, and at least he'll have that guidance first year. He brings his D line coach from Clemson as well, who's been great. The offensive coordinator Jeff Lebby was also at UCF when Dylan Gabriel was really at his best. So there's reasons to believe on both sides of the ball. The problem is they lost a lot to the transfer portal, and I only had them fifth best in the Big 12 last season to begin with. I had them as really lucky last season. So I think they're starting from not quite the position of strength that the fans of the Sooners think they are. The total wins of 9.5 seems high, but with just a lot of unknowns here, it's hard to get a read on just how much value there is in taking that under. Can I see them losing only 2 games? Yeah, that's not likely, but I'm having a hard time getting my arms around a more specific number about not likely in terms of number of wins that they'll have.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of skeptical about Oklahoma. We'll have to see how they do it. I mean, here's the thing: we could be wrong. Dylan Gabriel could be electric. He could still be. Oklahoma is known to have good offenses, right? I'm sure they have some pieces left. They have lost a lot, but I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm pegging them as going to underperform at least this year, and maybe they can start steadily improving for a couple of years. But I'm not loving them right now off the top. Last but not least, for the Big 12, we have Kansas State. So this was an interesting kind of team last year, kind of a very up and down season. They did go to a bowl in which they demolished LSU, which had literally no one left. I think pretty much everybody had left or had COVID or whatever. Now they get Adriana Martinez from Nebraska, who's actually pretty good at Nebraska. It's kind of failed by the rest of Nebraska, but he was not bad, and he actually could do some stuff. They were competitive in some games because of Adriana Martinez, and then they lost games because of not Adriana Martinez. So, yeah, not bad. This team could improve. I don't know. Like Kansas State is randomly a team that will have good seasons, and I think this could be potentially one of them when you're looking at a Big 12 when you have big question marks on Texas, big question marks on Oklahoma. A just kind of stable team that might be what could take that could be that could just be what could take it this year. Um, what do you think about that? Do you have this team as a competitor or kind of just a middle tier team?
I have them beyond a competitor. I'll put it that way. What I really, really, really like, just to give a little more color to your Adrian Martinez, data. He was sixth nationally in yards per attempt, and he was in a scheme that scared nobody. He had no talent around him. He hadn't been coached. He's throwing off his back foot. I think he literally had a broken jaw. I think he had a torn labrum also, and he still was sixth nationally in yards per attempt. So what do? We take a naturally gifted guy who was in a horrible system, not coached, and we drop him into a system that had the seventh rated yards per attempt quarterback in Skyler Thompson. And Skyler Thompson, nice quarterback, not nearly as gifted as Adrian Martinez. I think that basically that move takes them up substantially on offense. I had him sixth in offense. If you have Adrian Martinez and is it Deuce Vaughn? Is that the running back? You have those two. That's not a fun offense to play. That's tough. And I think that you're looking at a team that's going to be in the top 3 or 4 in offense or defense, which really lines up with what we saw Baylor did last season. They were good at everything, just enough to let other teams kind of beat themselves. And with so much upheaval in the conference this year, I think that model really, really works. They lose a little on the offensive line, but their coach, Chris Kleeman, he comes through a program where he always had to replace. Um, it's not like there's a huge recruiting pipeline to where he was, in the FCS. Their defense is among the highest in terms of the improvement metric. So they definitely will get better, and they were good last season. Um, I'm all in on them. I'm going to bet over their 4.5 conference wins. I think that's easy. The 7 total is pretty easy too. And Circus Sports, if you're going to follow one account that actually has odds go to them, they post first. They have the best lines. They have them at 14-1. I'm definitely going to get a piece of that. I think that's great value.
Yeah, that's not bad. I don't hate that at all. I think this team could do some stuff this year. And again, they were a team that were kind of poised to do it last year, and I think they have a good quarterback. Do they have the best quarterback in the Big 12?
Let me see. I had him. Well, his metrics are just a little behind Tyler Shock, actually.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, and then obviously, the master of the small sample size in at TCU. We're just going to kind of ignore him.
So so what? Kansas State, Texas Tech, Big 12 final? For,
I don't know about Texas Tech. I think push comes to shove, I'd probably have Baylor in that other spot. But
all right.
it just seems like the magical season for Kansas State. Every once in a while you can see like the window opening, and I think
Yeah.
maybe the window that closed for Iowa State's opening for Kansas State.
Yeah, that's all their extra wins are going to Kansas State. Um, all right. So moving on here, let's hit on some of the other teams from some other conferences that Conference USA, as I called it, a lesser conference, but still a conference. UTSA, the Roadrunners. They actually had an undefeated season last year that was interrupted by I think it was that they lost in the conference championship. They had an undefeated season that was lost there. Um, it was like
They
they were.
actually they actually won the conference. You actually corrected me on that last time.
Oh, did they?
They beat
Oh,
Western Kentucky.
that's right. They did. Yeah, they lost in the bowl.
Yeah.
That's right. They lost in the bowl. That's right. My bad. Say I got it right the last time. I got it wrong this time. No, this team is kind of interesting. It was a favorite of people online. It was for some people on Twitter. It was a team that kind of came out of nowhere and shocked people. They're definitely not coming out of nowhere now. People know that now. I mean, they can't go much higher than where they are now. This isn't a team that's going to take down like Alabama or something. But where do you see them at this year? Do you see them as like was that a one-off fluke last year? Like, do they lose pieces? What do you think on this?
They've got again that interesting profile of in 2021, they were fourth in QB plus, third in offense, first in defense, and third overall. So, really good at defense, but it's not by any means dominant. But they were undefeated until actually their only loss was to North Texas, until they got to the bowl. They just look like kind of like that balanced team that just wins. The thing that's really sticking out to me is within Conference USA, they have they're by far the first in luck. They had almost 3 games better luck than the second place team in that conference. So it's got to come back to earth. I hate to call it a fluke because it was a fun team and they deserved it, but I don't think they were as good as we saw. I had them 3.5 games lucky last year, and actually K Ford shows them dropping 3.6 wins. We're just almost exactly in line on that. Um, that lines up with their total. Their season total in Vegas is at 8, which is a drop from 11-1 in the regular season. So I just think they kind of just don't get all the breaks they got last year. They'll be good, but I don't think they'll be good enough to win. I just think that magic just finds itself elsewhere.
Yeah, that does make sense. Generally, when you see a team, and this is an area in the betting lines for people to take advantage of. When you see a team that has this magical season, people are like, "Oh my God, this team is so—" yeah." Immediately, start betting against that team, because generally that team had like a one-off fluke, or people didn't see them coming, but now they are going to see them coming, right? So yeah, generally that's a good place to bet against them, right? Like 11-1 in 2021, like. I think that they could definitely have some regression in this upcoming year. Um, UTEP. So this is an interesting team. Um, this team like did good at times, but then chronically underperformed at other times. It was a weird season for them. Sometimes my model liked them a lot, and then they'd get crushed. But sometimes my model would hate them, and then they my model would love them, and they'd lose that game. Um, it's a weird it's a weird team. I think like they could be a better team this year, but I don't know. I'm skeptical to bet on this team. What do you think? Do you like this team this year?
I do. So, if you look at last year, there was in Conference USA, there was a clear top three in Western Kentucky, UAB, and UTSA. And then you have UTEP all by themselves as a clear fourth best team. They had the second best quarterback by my metrics, which is saying a lot because it was actually a good conference in terms of quarterback play. They lose their biggest receiver, Cowing, to Arizona. But what's interesting is the two receivers that they have returning, average just a little bit less per reception compared to Cowing. So I think he's probably a little more replaceable than people might be thinking, and why people are looking for UTEP to take a big step back. The other thing I like about this is Dana Dimmel has had kind of like two different careers. Their coach. He was the coach at Wyoming for 3 years in the late '90s, and he did so well that Houston hired him. And if you look, he just got no quarterback play. And there's a lot of good coaches that just they can't get that quarterback out of the gate, and they never get their career on track. Um, so it didn't work out at Houston. He winds up at Kansas State. And this is where I think he sees the Bill Snyder model of Bill Snyder builds so much through JUCOs and he's always having to rebuild. And I think that I bring that up because I think the talent by Cowing, I think Dimmel's kind of got more of a process in place where he can get another guy to take over that role that he had. They had the second best defense in Conference USA. Um, and I've got four metrics that I use preseason to measure like how a defense will do. There's returning talent, career starts, the improvement metric, and then how many starts will be the prime of their career. And this is crazy. There are only two teams are one standard deviation above in all four of their metrics, and that's UTEP. So I think the second best defense in the conference is going to take a huge step forward. Um, their season total is 5.5 wins. I think they covered that easily. Um, I would usually just kind of out of a default position bet on UAB to win Conference USA, but Bill Clark, their awesome coach, had to resign or retire because of back problems. I think that opens the door. And my buddies at Circus Sports have them at 30-1 to win Conference USA, and I'm definitely going to take a piece of that.
Yeah, 30-1. It's a little crazy, but it is Conference USA. So yeah, yeah, maybe not a bad idea. That could be a kind of really sleeper bet that could get there at the end of the year. You never know, right? Small, I mean it's 31. Small little $10 bet on that. That's fine. $300, I'll take that.
Look at that. I convinced you.
Yeah, I'll take it. 30-1. The thing of it is, I feel like with some of these other conferences, like the value is in some random team. Cause like there's so many times a team will randomly win this conference that no one is expecting. Like it's generally not the favorites that win this. It's a lot of the times it's some random team that because the thing is when you have to think about these lines for winning conferences, it's not the ones that people like. It's basically it's teams that people don't know about that are the best teams, but
Yep.
generally the bigger names, generally the teams that won the conference last year, they'll have really high odds they'll have really high odds to win it. And the thing is that's gone now. Like the people who brought that on, they're gone. They moved on to a different school now. The teams that you want to target are teams that are underlooked under the radar that are not big names, because that's the teams that win these conferences, right? I remember San Jose State won um,
Yep.
Yep, in 2020,
2020.
yep, 2020, and then they just got just completely destroyed the next year. And this
Yeah,
happens a
and
lot.
that you could see signs though, like it did, and that 2020 kind of came out of nowhere, but they had signs in 2019 where they made some big steps forward. I think they actually won an Army in 2019. Yeah, they would have because they didn't play any non-conference in 2020. And that was, they were like an 8-point dog, and just San Jose State just doesn't win on the road,
Mhm.
especially in a different time zone. That just doesn't happen. So, to your point, I think you're getting that best value when you have a coach's initial ascent at a program too. I think that's you're kind of seeing. I can make an argument that this is what you're seeing with Dimmel at UTEP because they stunk, and they've taken, they're actually reasonable. They took a step forward in 2020. It was funny because it was the COVID year, and they were kind of the Hawaii of September because they were the last game, but they made some improvement. And they took another step forward, and just I like the pedigree, I like the trajectory, and I think that with Bill Clark having to resign, I think the conference is a lot more open than people might think.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it could be really interesting with some teams like that. And my preferred method to bet on some of these is definitely betting on those dogs. Liberty. So this was where this is Hugh Freeze's, yeah, Freeze's team. This was where Malik Willis was. He had a lot of hype. A lot of people thought he was going to go in the first round. Fell to the third round. Plummeted like a stone. I thought he was going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler. It turns out he was not a Pittsburgh Steeler. They picked Kenny Pickett instead. We'll see if that's correct or not. Who knows? We may actually see in a couple days. I'm not sure if Malik Willis is going to see some time in the preseason along with Kenny Pickett. But yeah, I am not the biggest fan of this Liberty team now. I like sometimes it's one thing keeping a team together, and again, Liberty, we're not playing like you're not playing SEC teams, or if you are, you're not winning those games, right? A lot of the times they'll have one good quarterback, and then they just can't replicate that, and that's the problem. I, yeah, but again, this is again the same thing, right? Their win total 7.5. This is a perfect example of a team where it's like, oh, Liberty, that's a big name. They were great
Yep.
last year, right?
Yep.
Well, bet the over on that. That's fine, and then they win 4 games, right? So this is the thing. Is that's your thoughts on this exactly, right?
Exactly. And the thing is, you made exactly my argument. The thing is too, maybe like a second level fan who kind of knows names but not numbers would say, with Charlie Brewer, well, he won the Big 12 one year, right? And he's their quarterback. It's like, yeah, and he's completely stunk since then. His QB plus the last 2 years are 61 and 58. I mean, he didn't do well at Utah, and Utah Utah had a good system to play in. He stunk there. One other thing, just Liberty, they are one of only 4 teams that actually has well below average improvement metric on both the offensive line and the defense. I think they were a legitimately okay team last season, maybe a little bit overrated, but it's not like Hugh Freeze has some big pipeline of talent to put in, especially Exhibit A is Charlie Bruder is your quarterback.
Yeah, that's not particularly great. I'm not the most confident in that um, at all. Um, but yeah, I'm a little yeah, I'm not the most confident in that team this year. Um, Other Conference USA teams, Florida International again. Um, you can have randomly some of these teams that will like some of these teams are so random. These are teams that play on Thursday nights and Friday nights. These are like the Friday night game where this team will play another team you've never heard of before. And sometimes they win that game, and sometimes they don't. And it's yeah, sometimes like so. I guess two kind of teams that look on that like again, we're kind of highlighting some bad luck teams: Florida International and Louisiana Tech. What do you think about them? Do you see them kind of taking a step up this year, or
Yeah, I only include them because they were so bad last season, and I'm just, I have them and K Ford both have them improving. I had Florida International with 3 games of bad luck last season, and K Ford has them improving by 3.1. Louisiana Tech, I had, about a game and a half of bad luck, and K Ford has them, 2.2 and a half better. Now, there's some strong arguments to be made there. The arguments against are basically, have you seen these teams play? They stunk. They really, really stunk. They're both in bad situations. But if you're just looking for, kind of a random, just like over to play, worth thinking about these 2 teams.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? I think actually Florida International plays on like the first Friday night of the season. So again, uh this is a perfect example of a team um where yeah, maybe on a Friday night or something, this team is like plus 7.5 or some crazy number like that. Yeah, you take a stab at them because whatever, right? Um Now moving on to the American Conference, South Florida. So this is a team. Jordan McLeod. He came from which school? He transferred from.
No, he was there in 2020.
Oh, okay, he was there. Okay, but
Yeah.
they weren't. South Florida is the other. This is the USF. This is the not UCF. It's somewhat
Yeah.
confusing sometimes, but no, this is a team that it's like they've had some really bad years, and I suspect they are probably due for some positive regression at some point. I suspect that might come this year. Um, but I I don't know. I This team is like it's not a team you love betting on, but this is again a kind of team where it could be like, oh, we're getting them like plus 21.5 or something, and I think they're like worth four. I think it's only minus 14, right? So like that's kind of the thing. I think. What do you think on this? Do you think this is do you think this is a team that could be on the on the uptrend, or what do you think?
I think, and we'll get to this in a second. I think the season total wins paints a really, really interesting picture. So just to kind of take a step back, Jeff Scott got there in 2020, took over a horrible program. Jordan McLeod actually had a pretty good QB plus there, considering how bad that first season was for Scott. They're then they had horrible quarterback play last season, but now they pick up Baylor's quarterback Gary Bohannon, who is was good, and I think going down a level is going to make him really good. They upgraded at defensive coordinator. Bob Shoop is good. There's kind of the question about why is he available, so maybe a little bit of a question mark there, but he's definitely going to be better than what they had. Um, there's been no signs of life on the one loss ledger. They've only won 3 games under Scott, against Citadel, against Florida A&M, and against Temple, all at home. So why do I like them? Number one is they've not been as bad as offense and probably sneakily better than we think. And then they get a big upgrade at quarterback. And Jeff Scott actually was very, very good in coaching quarterbacks at Clemson. Um, they had a game and a half of bad luck last season, and K Ford confirms that with he has them with 2 more wins this season versus last season. So I think there's a lot of signs that are pointing to a positive scenario. Now this is where it gets fascinating to me. This is kind of the horse racing part of my brain working. So Vegas has their win total at 4.5, which seems unremarkable. They won 2 games last season, or yeah, I think they won 2 games last season. But here's the thing. They've got, and I'm bullish on the Bulls, to use a really horrible pun. They're just not going to beat BYU. They're not going to win at Florida. They're not going to win at Louisville. They're not going to win at Cincinnati. They're not going to win at Houston. Those are 4 teams they're not going to beat, and 4 of them are on the road. It's just not, they're going to be 0-5. So this is what's really fascinating to me. So that means in the other 7 games, if Vegas has 4.5 wins, Vegas is saying that they're going to go 4-3 or 5-2 in the other 7 games, which is kind of remarkable considering that only one of those is out of conference. So that means they're going to have actually a respectable conference record kind of from out of nowhere. So if I'm looking at the schedule, their first few games, they start with they host BYU, and then they've got like a gimme I think against Bryant, but then they've got that those games at Florida and at Louisville. I can't see anything but 3-1. They're going to lose to the big three, and they're going to win that gimme against Bryant if it is. So what's going to happen is they're going to be a completely blank canvas. They're going to be an unknown to most of the people because they're going to lose handily the games they should lose, and they're going to beat a nobody. So I've really got my eye on that October 1st game against East Carolina because I think East Carolina showed some signs of life last season. They made a bowl, and you're going to have a South Florida team that's just a complete unknown that's probably going to be sneakily a lot better. And Vegas is telling you that with that season total. And I'm really going to look out for this. This has my early nomination for week 5 line that stinks out loud because I think it's going to be a lot shorter and people are going to say, South Florida, you're joking. and I'm gonna really, really have my eye on that. I can't say I'm gonna bet it without knowing what the line is, but that's kind of just one of the fascinating things that I saw once I kind of lined up their schedule and their season total wins.
Yeah, that's something I love doing too. I think some lines are up for college football, but a lot aren't, right? And that's the thing. So that's I love looking at certain lines and thinking about what lines will be in the future. And that's obviously exactly what you're doing here too. And that's one of the best things to do with the season, right? You're like, okay, where am I going to find value? Which team do I think is going to be coming off a big win and maybe coming like, and then due for a big loss? So no, that's really good insight, and I will think about that game a lot. Yeah, like you're right. Like that game could be like a weird one where it's like, oh, East Carolina minus 7.5, and people are like, oh, East Carolina is way better than USF, right? And then
Hmm.
they lose, right? So yeah, East Carolina is an interesting team. I think they could be a good team this year, but yeah, South Florida again. If they have been they were better this year than they were like last year, but at the same point in time, they do have some tough schedules. Um, yeah, we'll have to see. I'm interested in seeing how this USF team does, and how the model will like it in the middle of the season, right? Will the model think they're a really good team? Will they think they're a bad team, right? So
Yeah.
we'll have to see. All right. So any other kind of teams? So you've got some interesting potential ones here. UCF. So
Yeah.
basically they lose
I'm
their
just
yeah.
I'm just wondering here. They were just, it looked to me like Gus just really punched a hole in the bottom of the boat there. They really, for being happy that Josh Heupel left, they really didn't take a step forward at all. And their quarterback play stunk. Now, Gabriel was hurt last season, but Gabriel's a proven commodity, and he stunk last season. And I'm thinking that that's a bad first sign. And now they're asking John Reese Plumlee, who was a running quarterback at Ole Miss, and then he was moved to receiver, and he's thrown 34 passes the last 2 seasons. Is he really going to be the guy that can patch this hole that's in the boat? I think I think they could be in for a really rough season that people aren't looking, aren't expecting.
Well, see, this is the thing, right? As we're talking more and more about the transfer portal and stuff, you're going to start seeing quarterback needy teams. They're going to start picking up some of these guys, but they're going to go to the bigger leagues, right? Like you're going to like okay, you're a transfer quarterback, right? Spencer Rattler, South Carolina, right? Um, uh, JT Daniels, West Virginia. They're still going to other teams in the big league so they can show off and they can play against the top teams, right? They're not going to go to like if you're a quarterback for a team and then you get benched or you get shuffled down the depth chart, your first target isn't to go to something like UCF. Now, to be fair, UCF is going to go to the Big 12 next year. So this isn't so much of a problem for UCF in the future, but it's important note to go forward in the future where like we could start seeing some of these teams that if it's like, hey, if we start circling, hey, quarterback could be a problem for this team. These could be some teams that you could really have like you could target early for betting, like against the betting lines. You could be like, okay, like I'm really going to bet unders on these teams, right? Because it's gonna as we go with the transfer portal
Mhm.
here, if teams don't have a steady stream of quarterbacks coming in, it's going to be really hard to patch that hole through the transfer portal if you're not in one of the Power Five conferences. Because if you're a good quarterback like if you're a good quarterback on the lower tier, you're not going to want to do a lateral move, and if you're a badish quarterback on the top tier, but like you're an okayish quarterback that got benched or some bad things happened, you're not going to want to go down. You're going to want only a lateral move, right? So a lot of these teams in lower conferences, because of the transfer portal, they're going to have some real struggles finding quarterbacks, and that's an important thing to note going forward into the future. Um, Kind of two more here, just to round out the American Conference. Tulane, obviously, 3.5. You have them having a lot of bad luck last year. They did have some bad luck last year. Actually, they were. There was a couple of games that they definitely should have won there. And Houston is a team that I'm kind of high on. I think this could kind of be their year. Are you a little lower on them based on good or bad luck?
Yeah, I've got them. They had a game and a half a good luck last season, and K Ford shows them dropping two from last season. The thing is, it's kind of unfortunate because they were overlooked really good last season. To your point, so I think they could probably be a little better, but it won't show in their record just because they got a little benefit of the doubt in terms of luck.
Yeah, Tulane was. It was a team I liked at many points in time last season, but um, yeah, I will actually say that looking at my projections again, they are kind of a little messy. But yeah, like it for some of the teams that you're saying they had bad luck last season, my model is higher on them than the teams that you were saying had good luck last year. So, but Houston is another team. I don't know. I actually really like Clayton Tune. That guy has like decent backup quarterback in the NFL written all over him.
Hmm.
And the question is like, where does he go? Like, does he end? Like, I mean, the NFL will always need more quarterbacks, right? And there's a lot of teams that you could say need them now. I mean, I ran the numbers earlier. I don't remember off the top of my head how many, but like I think you could look at like maybe 10 teams could need quarterbacks. Depend. I mean, obviously some decide to just tank for a year, like the Seattle Seahawks, but some other ones like actually want a quarterback. And I think like there could be a decent market, and Clayton Tune could be kind of one of the diamonds in the rough in that sense. So I could definitely see him making a big step up this year. I think obviously a lot of attention is going to be played to Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams and some of the other ones, but watch out for Clayton Tune. That guy is just consistent. And that Houston team, they beat other teams. Like they will go out there and they will cover spreads. And if the thing is again, because it's Houston is not a big name school, you're getting value on them a lot of times. And I think Houston is
Yeah.
also going to the Big 12 next year too. I remember correctly. Is
In 23.
Yeah,
Yeah.
23. So again, like here's the thing: once Texas and Oklahoma, like next year in the Big 12 is going to be hilarious because there's going to be what I think 16 teams or no, 14
14.
teams. Yeah, 14 because
Yeah.
there's only 10 now. It's going to be a 14 team league because they're adding Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and I think Memphis.
BYU.
BYU. That's right. It's weirdly BYU. BYU should be in the Pac-12, but maybe they made the right call now. But no, yeah, it's gonna be a because those are all really good teams. Like BYU is also a really good team. We haven't talked about them yet, but I'm sure we will at some point in the future. But BYU is just like there's gonna be a lot of really good teams. Like even if Texas were at like full power or well as close as they can to be to full power, even Oklahoma, like some of these teams are actually pretty good. Like obviously Clayton Tune will probably be gone, but like next year. But like some of these teams are not horrible. And like watch out if you're still Steve Sarkisian at Texas with Archie Manning, or if you're Brent Venables at Oklahoma with someone, watch out because like BYU and Houston, these are decent programs, and they've been itching and waiting for a chance to prove that they're elite and top tier, and you're finally going to give them that chance. So watch out for them.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's kind of unusual, and of course, with the departure of Texas and Oklahoma, it makes things weird. But very, very interesting that you have four teams moving up into a conference, and they all figured to at least be in the very middle of that conference. It's not like they're making a move just to get stomped and get a larger rights deal paycheck. And especially once Texas and Oklahoma move, you're going to have a real good disbursement of talent across a lot of teams in that 2024 Big 12 going forward. It's going to be a really, really, really fun conference to watch.
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking too. Like that. I mean, again, obviously we have no idea what's happening with the Pac 12 or 10 or whatever. We have no idea what's happening with them right now. But like, assuming that Big 12 current is exists as it currently is constructed, I mean, heck, even if it adds, like, if the Pac 12 were dissolved and you get Washington and Oregon and maybe Stanford to the Big 10, and like then you just absorb the rest of it into the Big 12, like there's going to be a lot of competitive teams in that Big 12. Like you can make a case now, again, maybe not UCF, maybe this is going to be a down year for UCF, but like of all these teams, you can make decent arguments that all of them could like win that conference. Like again, we're talking about here. Like I feel like in some ways it's gonna resemble a like lower tier conference in terms of competitiveness and who can win. But like I'm actually really excited to see some of these Big 12 games. Like when we see UCF BYU for the first time, when we're seeing Houston, when we see like Houston Oklahoma, like Houston Baylor or Houston Oklahoma, like we're going to see some good games. Some of these are going to be really good teams, and
Yeah.
I'm really excited. Like next year is going to be crazy when you're seeing like, 'cause, like BYU could go into Texas and just crush them, and BYU could go into Oklahoma and crush them too, right? Like there's
Hmm.
going to be some really good games, and there's going to be some really because like you think you're gonna get what? You think BYU is gonna be 3.5 point favorites going into Oklahoma? No, right? They're gonna be 7 point dogs, right? And this is the thing. So, yeah, some
Yeah.
good value next year for sure. I'm really excited for next year. We're talking about this year, obviously, but I'm really excited for next year as we're talking about it.
One thing to watch out for that is just since see how bad the Big 12 really wants to put it to Oklahoma and Texas. And, I would be shocked if you don't have one of those playing a night game in Cincinnati in mid-November and the other playing a night game in late November at BYU.
That's a good point, right? Because technically, because it's going to be a 1 year only schedule, right? So there's no
Yeah.
guarantee that you need to have one. Because like yeah, because like normally you do a home and away, but you don't need to do that, right? So you could be like,
Nope.
cool, Texas. Guess what? You're going to play a midnight game
Yeah.
in BYU in November. So have fun. Have fun in Utah in November.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, no, I'm really excited for this. I think next year will be a fascinating year for the Big 12. But I think that basically wraps us up for this time. We still have some other conferences to talk about. We're going to do a couple more of these, obviously. But yeah, I'm really excited for this year. Some of these like the Big 12 is completely wide open again this year. I think really only like the Big Ten is the only one that's really kind of locked down at this point, I'd say. I'd say outside of the Big Ten, like the Big 12 is kind of wide open. The SEC is open to a lesser extent, but kind of less in the fact of it could be between. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about Georgia in the future, but yeah, there's a lot of big question marks this year, and that's what makes college football great. So thank you for coming on, Buck, and yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Okay. Thank you.